Hour two of the RP Show is brought to you in part by Outlaw Communications, where creativity is a way of life, specializing in strategic communications, leadership training, and clear conversational content that motivates your audience. Check them out at tonyplater.com. All right, we got him. QR Calgary's Jock Wilson. You're looking fresh. You're looking young. You're looking taut. What's different about you, Jock?
Dan, Roddy, do you want to be my agent? Great
Sure.
broadcaster, even a better person. Like, can you tell my wife that? That would be fantastic. Actually, I got some really bad news this morning. I got my hair cut just because I knew I was coming on the Rod Pedersen show. And I've been seeing the same stylist probably for 35 years. Sonia, she's a rock star. She's been taking care of my hair for such a long time. She told me this morning she's retiring. Shoot! I got to find a new stylist, Roddy. I just don't think I can live anymore.
Well, come down to Florida because my gal Melissa, she's a J-Lo clone. She's done Hard Time, and she doesn't just cut hair. She gives you great counseling in the chair. So, Melissa, it's a reason to come to Florida. I love her. I'm actually going there this afternoon, Jock, so I'll drop your name. Besides the haircut,
I appreciate that, buddy.
Well, with all the compliment, we're having a bubbly day here. There's so much crap and junk going on outside these 2 hours on the air with us. Let's have fun here. And for you, where's your focus in sports right now, or life for that matter?
Geez, actually, my focus is on Hawaii because I'm heading to Hawaii tomorrow. So if you really want my honest truth, I'm not even thinking sports. I'm obviously excited about the AFC and the NFC championship games this weekend. I think they're both going to be excellent games. Obviously following CFL free agency with, that around the corner on February the 10th. So that's exciting. Calgary Flames don't intrigue me anymore because, they're just not a very good hockey club, building for the future, building to get into the new arena. So I guess it's football all the time for me right now, which is fantastic. I love talking football. Hey, my vote would be for Matt Stafford. I think he should be the MVP. But we can go wherever you want to go tonight on the show.
Well, you kind of just did. You covered a lot of things. Like, do you remember who you had, if anybody, going into the year as a Super Bowl pick? Because I'll say it. I had the Bills and the Lions. Do you remember what yours were?
Well, I know I had the Bills because I was jumping on that bandwagon. I knew I had KC out because I just didn't like the direction of that team was going. So I basically said, KC's not going to make the playoffs. My colleague, Dave McIver here in Calgary, I do the football broadcast with him for the Calgary Stampeders on QR Calgary. And he's a big Patriot fan. And I will give him credit. I'll give him props because he said right from day one, he said, Jock, I look at the Patriots schedule. And I like what they've done with their team. I like what they've done in free agency. I like Mike Vrabel as a head coach. I tell you what, this team is going to compete. This team is going to have a chance to win, the AFC, be the number one seed. And I'm going, Dave, you're off your rockers, man. I just can't, I don't see it. How can that team go from crap to elite? Well, you know what? Dave McIver, I give him credit because, that team has gone elite. And now with Bo Nix out, I think it's going to be very, very interesting. Although, full well, you get the number one seed, and you have a very, very good chance to go to the Super Bowl. And sure enough, the Seahawks, obviously at home, they're going to be tough to beat this weekend as far as I'm concerned. And even with Bo Nix out, I still believe that home field advantage is going to give Denver a little bit of an advantage. And to be brutally honest, I'm a big Alex Singleton guy. So, you know what? If Alex Singleton can get to the Super Bowl and have a chance to win a Super Bowl, I'm all in for Alex Singleton. So let's see how it all plays out this weekend. But hey, the Patriots have been a great story this year.
Maybe they better put, or they should put Alex Singleton behind center. I get the game notes from the NFL, and Jarrett Stidham is the first player in the history of the NFL to start a conference championship with less than 5 career starts. But that's why we love sports, Jock, and that's the thing. You've had the wonderful fortune, as have I, to be in the sports media business pretty much our whole lives. And I always hate when kids say to me, I listened to you when I was a kid. But I'll say this, Jock. I listened to you when I was at Mount Royal College, and you were on 9 Calgary Flames Radio, 66 CFR in my 19. How does that feel?
Well, it's funny you mention that because I think you know Jamie Thomas. Jamie Thomas is a good Calgary kid. He does Jets TV for the one.
Cochran.
Yes, good point. So anyway, so Jamie Thomas was talking Jets on my show the other night, and his mom and dad were listening. And his mom and dad sent him a text because Jamie sent me this text. He said, do you remember Jock Wilson? Like, he's a veteran. He's been around for a long time. Remember when we went to McDonald's on 17th Avenue and got his Sports Talk with Jock mug? You know, that had to be 25 years ago, Rod. Freak, I am old. It's crazy. So Jamie remembered as a kid coming to see me, and now I've got him on my radio show. So, yeah, go figure. You know, hey, are we veterans or are we just old? I don't know.
I don't know, but we're still having fun. That's what I can tell you. So Scott in Vancouver writes in, he goes, "Go Seahawks." I do think these are going to be some tremendous conference championship games on Sunday. So you said that we all think the Patriots will win, but the Seahawks Rams, if you think Stafford's the MVP, which he may well be, do you see them going into Seattle and pulling off an upset?
It's a great question because, you know, it's your typical offense versus defense game, isn't it? You know, the Seahawks have obviously a better defense than the Rams, although the Rams aren't bad. I just think, you know, defensively the Seahawks are a little bit better. And then you've got the great offense of, you know, Matthew Stafford and the Rams. So what's going to happen? It's funny because I had Clarence Hicks. Clarence Hicks, big defensive lineman for the Calgary Stampeders, signed a 3-year deal yesterday. I asked him the same question. You're a defensive guy. You know, does defense win championships? And he goes, Jock, that's a little old school. You know, that used to be the case, but not anymore. But he still thinks the Seahawks, because he's got a couple of buddies on that team, are gonna win that game. So you know, flip a coin. I'll defer to obviously Clarence Hicks because he knows a lot more about football than I do. If he is taking, you know, the Seattle Seahawks, I'll take the Seattle Seahawks as well. But I do think it's going to be a heck of a game. I think both of these games are going to be really, really wildly outstanding and close and entertaining. So, you know, we've seen some great football right now in the NFL playoffs, and I think we're in for a great weekend.
6 hours of fantastic football on Sunday. Yes, Jeff the Stamps fan, I will get to your question in a second. We discerned earlier this week that Jeff the Stamps fan is our #1 viewer of all time. He probably has the most hours logged watching. So I'm not going to forget you, Jeff. I'm not. But I just, one more NFL thing, Jock. With the owner of the Bills talking and starting all this trouble with what he said. Yeah, right. And then the Ravens owner speaking last week. Like, I think all the owners should talk, because they're not going to talk again for another decade for all the crap they've started. This is why they don't talk. You know?
Well, you know, it's funny because you probably saw, you know, Robert Kraft of the New England Patriots, you know, go on his local radio station and, you know, talk about the 18-2, 18 regular season games, 2 preseason games, which I think we all knew about, but then saying every single team in the league is going to play an international game, you know, starting next season. I think that's, you know, very interesting. And how do you grow revenues in the NFL? Because the NFL is a marketing machine, and they've already tapped out, you know, the TV contracts in the U.S., and, you know, the streaming numbers are off the boards. And it is amazing when you think 93 of the top 100 rated games are NFL games. So it just goes to show you, how are you going to grow revenue in the United States? Is obviously through global, it's through the international exposure, it's through the streaming, it's everything that's going from that standpoint. So I do love it when owners speak. You know, we have an owner here in Calgary of Calgary Sport and Entertainment, Murray Edwards. He doesn't speak very often, you know, so I'd like to see him speak some more. Sometimes it's not a good thing for your brand. Like Terry Pagula, a lot of people will say he's totally screwed up the Buffalo Sabres. Now, has he screwed up the Buffalo Bills? Let's hope not. The Bills have been a good franchise, but a franchise that's never won a Super Bowl, so that's too bad. You know, do I like how it transpired yesterday at the news conference? You know, from a media perspective, I love it because, you know what, it gives us lots of talking points, everything from that standpoint. But if you're a fan of the Buffalo Bills, you're saying, holy shoot, we are just so dysfunctional. This is crazy. So I do think it's fantastic. And hey, good sound bites never hurt our business at all.
I know. And the owner of the Ravens, Bisciotti, whatever Steve, I should be respectful. Steve Bisciotti. He took a shot at Tony Dungy when he spoke. He's like, who the hell is he to criticize me? Blah, 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 blah. I'm like, you're like every owner I've ever met. Why are you so thin-skinned? But anyways, the one question we've been asking the viewers today is, if you could ask your favorite team owner one question, what would it be? And what would be yours?
Whew, that is a great question. I guess if I could ask Murray Edwards anything, and Murray Edwards, just so the viewers know, He owns basically all the sports properties here in Calgary, at least most of them. He doesn't own the soccer team. He doesn't own, the basketball team, but he owns the Calgary Roughnecks. He owns the Calgary Hitmen. He owns the Calgary Wranglers. He owns the Calgary Stampeders. He owns the Calgary Flames. I would love to know if Murray Edwards, he's one of the richest dudes in Alberta. The guy is loaded. Canadian natural resources, everything from that standpoint. I would say, Murray, can't you get off your ass, get off your wallet, and help us build a stadium here in Calgary for football? That's what I would love to ask him. Now, again, there's all sorts of rumors. Spruce Meadows owns the soccer team, and with the rule changes coming up in 2027, the big speculation, is, can you turn a soccer pitch into a new CFL stadium? And, I do think Spruce Meadows would love to build, a bigger soccer stadium. Could they buy the Calgary Stampeders? And could you see the Stampeders and Calvary FC work under the same umbrella, in the south part of the city? Could that be the road to a new stadium in Calgary? I don't know. This is all, I don't have any inside information, Rod. I'm just throwing it out there because of some of the speculation out there. But, I would love to see a new football stadium in this city. I'll give Ken King credit. Ken King, before he passed away, he had this vision about Calgary Next. And Calgary Next was going to be a field house for the city of Calgary, which we've talked about for ages. It was going to be a new football stadium. It was going to be the new event center. And back in the day, that was going to be, downtown on the west side of the inner city, and it was going to clean up the environmental disaster, which is the creosote that's soaking into the Bow River. It was going to clean that up, and they were going to build this. It was going to be less than $1 billion. And now we're building an event center that's going to cost over $1 billion. So Ken King had the vision, but of course he sort of had an issue with the mayor at the time, and that was Mayor Nenshi, and who's now the NDP leader here in Alberta. And of course they butted heads a lot. And Mayor Nenshi wanted to develop the east side of the city, and he wanted to go on the west side of the city. So it never transpired. We didn't know the exact cost of what it was going to cost to clean up the creosote, but would have dealt with a lot of issues for the city. And it is kind of sad that we didn't see it, because I'm not sure in my lifetime we're going to ever see a new football stadium in this city.
Well, as you say, the mayor didn't want it, period. And city council didn't help, but I was following that really closely. By the way, when I say these owners are all the same, no, they're not. Bill Foley isn't like that in Vegas. And like Ryan in upstate New York writes in, he says, my question to Woody Johnson would be, you promised Jets fans their own stadium when you bought the franchise in 2000. Why are you still sharing a stadium with the Giants over 25 years later? See, there's the owners that make the promises with zero inclination of following up on them. Whereas with Foley, he's told me, as I'm talking to you right now, he's like, we're going to fill this rink with local Nevada people. We're going to win a Stanley Cup in 6 years. Bing, 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 bing. He did everything that he said they were going to do. And that's pretty rare, Jock.
Well, you know what? You got the owner of the Utah Mammoth, basically saying the same thing. And, Mr. Smith is, said, hey, look, we don't have a great hockey arena right now, but I guarantee you, and he guaranteed the NHL that they would make improvements to that building, which they have. And, they're building something there. So I do love it when owners do put their money where their mouth is. And I think that's good for the fan. It's obviously good for the city, too.
Okay, for Jeff the Stamps fan, I don't want to make him wait any longer, and I got to sift through all these comments here. Oh, he says, Mr. Wilson. Outside our own. Wilson. Yeah, he says, outside our own free agents, is there anyone you think that Calgary Stampeders are targeting? And could we see a 4 Canadian offensive line?
Yeah, it's interesting because February 10th free agency kicks in. So, right now teams are taking care of their own free agents. The Calgary Stampeders had a great turnaround season last year. And, you got to give Cole Huffnagel, you got to give Dave Dickinson, you got to give, the organization some credit because they did. They said they were going to be bold. And they were bold because they made the 2 big trades. They brought in Vernon Adams. They brought in Flora Malade. They went out in free agency and they signed some really, really key players. This year, Dave is handling it a little bit differently. He always likes to take care of in-house. But losing Jalen Hutchins to the Vikings on an NFL futures deal, you probably know the story because you follow the CFL so closely, Rod. That dude is a stud. That dude, when he can bench press and just on the interior of the defensive line, I think he's going to get a very, very long look in the NFL. and Viking fans are going to be very excited about him. So that's going to be a big loss on the interior of the defensive line for the Calgary Stampeders. Jacob Roberts, also with the Vikings, outstanding linebacker for the team last year. That's now a big hole for this team. And it's going to be interesting. Flo Malade, of course, he had the Achilles injury. He's not going to be able to start the season. Re-signing Clarence Hicks was important, but the Stampeders made the big gains last year because of what they did on the defensive side of the ball. So I'm thinking, if I'm Dave Dickinson, I'm going to see who exactly is available on February the 10th, and I am looking to, Markel Lee's okay in the middle. He's going to be your middle linebacker in Calgary, but I am looking to maybe bring in another stud on the defensive line, especially on the interior of the defensive line, and then, we'll see what happens at that linebacker position as well.
Chief Johnny Moe writes in from Winnipeg. He says, it's so cold here, the Weather Network app is frozen. Oh, yeah, it's like minus 50 there as the Panthers get ready to take on the Jets tonight. I'm not going to ask you about that game, but you said you're checked out on hockey, but you haven't really checked out on hockey. You host a sports show every night on QR Calgary. Last summer, the optimism in Calgary around the Flames was higher than I've seen in decades, and now this. What is your take on the Flames as we sit here today?
It's a great question, Rod, because I look at the Flames and what they did last year. Everybody was impressed. Everybody was excited. The fact that this team had 96 points last year and basically lose on a count back to the St. Louis Blues and don't make the playoffs, and that was a gut punch. That was a heartbreaking situation because you get into the tournament, as you can pull off the odd upset and you can really create some excitement for the city of Calgary. Right now, the Flames are in a different situation, and now that they've traded Rasmus Andersson, let's be honest. The Calgary Flames had a really crappy power play even with Rasmus Andersson. I don't know what's worse than crappy, but it's 30th in the league right now. They're probably the 32nd in the league, without Rasmus Andersson being the quarterback. Is Zane Parekh going to be that guy that quarterbacks that power play moving forward? I don't pretend to say I know the entire system for the Calgary Flames and the farm system for the Flames, but I do have my own NHL insider, Craig Button. You know him very, very well, and Craig Button has his finger on the pulse of what organizations have on their farm system and in their system, and he is very, very high on what Craig Conroy has done building the assets, and I think when you look at that, and you see the ultimate goal for this organization is to be competitive when they move into their new building in 2027. Maybe they are on the right track. So I think the big questions here in Calgary is, now that you've traded Rasmus Andersson, what do you do with Nazem Kadri? You could see if you watched the game last night, Nazem Kadri's frustrated. Does he like Calgary? Yes. Does he want to be a Flame and be part of the solution here in Calgary? Yes. But does he want to win another championship? I think yes is the answer to that too. So, if he comes to Craig Conroy and says, look, let's get me to a contender, I think that could certainly happen. And then Blake Coleman is the other guy. Blake Coleman is a veteran, a guy that's won a Stanley Cup championship, still has term left in his contract, but he could certainly help a team. But, in a couple of years, Blake Coleman and Nazem Kadri will be, on the tail end of their prime, so to speak, so will they really help you moving forward. I think those are the biggest things now for the Calgary Flames moving forward. But as you know, you can't win with a bunch of kids in the NHL, because if you're going to go with a bunch of kids, you're just going to be a very, very average, below average team. So
they're running it. We're out of time. Thank you, Jocko. Enjoy Hawaii. Safe travels.
Hey, thanks, buddy.
Good job, man. Good to see you. Thank you so much. Yeah, they're gonna kick us off. We'll be right back with a sports update and viewer takeover the rest of the way of the Silver State Sports and Entertainment Network and Game Plus TV.